Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Our Vedas are formerly three, later it was four. Rug, Yaju, Sama. Later added Atharva Veda. All these four Vedas instructs like a king. That means it's a word of Veda. Mean we should follow. Moreover, whatever the Vedas sayings we hear, we listen or follow, that is very easily accessible, very easily to follow. For example, Satyam Vada, Dharmam Chara, Matrudevo Bhava, Pitrudevo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Athidi Devo Bhava. These are the fundamental instructions from Vedas. What is wrong? That's why Vedas never suggest the commands like a king. That's why Vedaha Prabhu Samhita. Okay. When we come about Upavedas and Ramayana, Mahabharata, Purana, etc., we get a lot of information about our Indian literature, Indian tradition, Indian culture, etc. Among them, there is 6 darshanas, that is called Shad Darshana. In Shad Darshana, there is a great work is called Mimamsa Saastra, the science of Mimamsa. Mimamsa Saastra again has 2 branches, Purva Mimamsa, Uttara Mimamsa. That means Purva Paksham, Uttara Paksham. If you take a topic, there will be dual opinion. A judge gives judgment after listening the views of the 2 parties. Similarly, Mimamsa Saastra is an elaboratedly gives us a vivid picture to understand the essence of the greatness of the sciences, sastras and spiritual activities. It gives clarity through discussing various logics, tarkas. For example, if we want butter, what do we have to do? We have to churn curd, no? As long as you churn, you will get butter. Similarly, the churning of Shastras, we get the essence of our essential needs. In the form of advices, suggestions, etc. That's why this Mimamsa especially is a Sanskrit word, reflection or critical investigation. That means it takes in a proper way. At the same time, in detailed description we can find from the Shastra of Mimamsa only. There are so many commentaries we can hear, we can know for this Mimamsa Saastra. They were all not an ordinary, they were great saints. Such commentaries also emphasizes much on the beneficial of Mimamsa Saastra towards the mankind. Whatever the thing is once pronounced, that should be taken into detailed description through Mimamsa Saastra. That's why Among Shad Darshana, Mimamsa is one of the Darshana. Let us get detail. That's why I took today topic of Mimamsa Saastra. Already Nyaya over, Tarka over. Is it? Jyotisham over. Niruktam, Kalpam, there is another two left. Mimamsa. Today I took, therefore I chose the choice of Mimamsa Saastra before you. The prayer. Stapakaya cha dharmasya satya dharma swarupini avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Mimamsa is a Sanskrit word. What it shows? Reflection or critical investigation, and thus refers to a tradition of contemplation which reflected on the meaning of certain Vedic texts. This tradition is also known as Purva Mimamsa. Why? Because of its focus on the earlier Vedic texts dealing with ritual actions, and similarly as Karma Mimamsa due to its focus on ritual action. It is one of the 6 Vedic affirming Astika schools of Hinduism. This particular school is known for its philosophical theories on the nature of Dharma, based on her hermeneutics of the Vedas, especially the Brahmanas and Samhitas. The Mimamsa school was a fundamental one. It also was foundational and influential for the Vedantic schools, which were also known as Uttara Mimamsa for their focus on the later portions of the Vedas. Previous portions Purva Mimamsa, later portions are called Uttara Mimamsa. The Upanishads, nothing. Veda, after the later Vedas mean Upanishads. While both earlier and later Mimamsa investigate the aim of human action, they do so with different attitudes towards the necessity of the ritual practices. Mimamsa has several sub-schools, each defined by its epistemology. The Prabhakara sub-school, which takes its name from the 7th century philosopher Prabhakar, described the 5 epistemically reliable means to gaining knowledge. Pratyaksha means perception, Anumana, inference, Upamana, by comparison and analogy, Arthapatti, the use of postulation and derivation from circumstances, and Shabda, the word or a testimony of past or present reliable experts. The Bhatta means one of the poet or present reliable experts, who Kumarila Bhatta added a 6th means to its canon, Anupalabdhi, meant non-perception or proof by the absence of cognition. The school of Mimamsa consists of both atheistic and theistic doctrines, but the school showed little interest in systematic examination of the existence of gods. For the Mimamsa school, Dharma meant rituals and social duties, not devas or gods, because gods existed only in name. The Mimamsakas also held that Vedas are eternal, authorless, infallible, that Vedic Vidhi or injunctions and mantras in rituals are prescriptive actions, and the rituals are of primary importance and merit. They considered philosophical view that Vedanta disagree with. Darshana, the central concerns. Mimamsa is one of the 6 classical Hindu darshanas. It is among the earliest schools of Hindu philosophies. It has attracted relatively less scholarly study. Although its theories and particularly its questions on exegesis and theology have been highly influential on all classical Indian philosophies. Its analysis of language has been of central importance to the legal literature of India. Ancient Mimamsa, a central concern was epistemology. Epistemology means pramanam, means proof. That is, what are the reliable means to knowledge. It debated not only how does man ever learn to or know whatever he knows, but also whether the nature of all knowledge is inherently circular, whether those such as foundationalists who heretic or who critique the validity of any justified beliefs, and knowledge system make flawed presumptions of the very premises they critique, and how to correctly interpret and avoid incorrectly interpreting dharma texts such as the Vedas. To Mimamsa scholarly, the nature of non-empirical knowledge and human means to it are such that one can never demonstrate certainty, one can only flashing knowledge claims in some cases. The central text of Mimamsa school is Jaiminis Mimamsa Sutras, along with the historically influential commentaries on this sutra by Shabara and by Kumarila Bhatta. Shabara Bhashyam, Kumarila Bhatta Bhashyam is to say. Together these texts develop and apply the rules of language analysis, asserting that one must not only examine injunctive propositions to be true or not true. Rather, one can only prove a non-empirical proposition is false, not false, or uncertain. For example, Mimamsakas welcome not only the demand for proof of injunctive proposition such as Agnihotra ritual leads on to heaven, something else leads one to heaven, there is heaven, there is no heaven, and so on. Mimamsa literature states that it is satisfactory verifiable proof for all such propositions cannot be found by its proponents and its opponents. Then the proposition needs to be accepted as a part of a belief system. Beliefs such as those in the scriptures must be accepted to be true unless its opponents can demonstrate that the scriptures they challenge are false. If they do not try to do so, it is hypocrisy. If they try to do so, it can only lead to infinite regress. According to Mimamsaka, is an activity of communication. That means vyavahara pravrutti, and is accepted as authoritative because it is a socially validated practice unless perceptually verifiable evidence energies that proves parts or all of it as false or harmful. Pratyaksha. Pratyaksha means perception. It is of two types in Mimamsa and other schools of Hinduism, external and internal. External perception is described as that arising from the interaction of five senses and worldly objects, while the internal perception is described by the school as that is inner sense, the mind. The ancient and medieval Indian texts identify four requirements for correct perception. Indriyartha sannikarshaha avyapadeshyami, direct experience by one's sensory organs with the object or non-verbal correct perception is through hereby, according to ancient Indian scholars, where one's sensory organ relies on accepting or rejecting someone else's perception. Avyabhichara does not wander, correct perception does not change, nor is it the result of a deception, because one's sensory organ or means of observation is drifting, and vyasayatmaka. Vyavasayatmaka means definitely correct perception excludes judgments, no doubt, either because of one's failure to observe all the details or because one is mixing inference with observation and observing what one wants to observe. Anumanam. It means inference. It is described as reaching a new conclusion and truth from one or more observations and previous truths by applying a realism. Particular cause. Observing smoke and inferring fire is an example of Anumana. In all except one Hindu philosophies, this is a valid and useful means to knowledge. The method of inference explained by Indians consists of three parts: pratigna, hetu, and drishtanta. The hypothesis must further be broken down into two parts, state the ancient Indian schools, sadhya and paksha. The inference is conditionally true if sapaksha are present and vipaksha are absent. For rigor, the Indian philosophies also state and further epistemic steps. For example, they demand vyapti, means the requirement that the hetu must necessarily and separately account for the inference in all cases, in both sapaksha and vipaksha. A conditionally proven hypothesis called nigamana, means conclusion. Upamana. Upamana means comparison and analogy. Some Hindu schools consider it as a proper means of knowledge. Upamana may be explained with the example of traveler who has never visited lands or islands with endemic population of wildlife. He or she is told by someone who has been there that in those lands you see an animal that sort of looks like a cow, grazes like a cow, but is different from a cow in such and in such a way. Such use of analogy and comparison is, state the Indian epistemologists, a valid means of conditional knowledge, as it helps the traveler identify the name animal later. The subject of comparison is formally called Upameyam. The object of comparison is called Upamanam. While the attributes are identified as Samanya, thus explains if a boy says her face is like the moon in charmingness, her face is Upameyam. The moon is Upamanam. And charming next is Samanya. In various ancient texts of Hinduism, 32 types of Upamana and their values in epistemology are debated. Now, Arthapatti. It means postulation, derivation from the circumstances. In contemporary logic, this pramana is similar to circumstantial implication. As example, if a person left in a boat on a river earlier and the time is how past the expected time of arrival, then the circumstances support the truth to postulate that the person has arrived. Many Indian scholars consider this pramana as arrival, or it best weak because the boat may have gotten delayed or diverted. However, in cases such as deriving the twice time of future, sunrise or sunset, this method was asserted by the proponents is to be reliable. The Hindu schools that accept This means of knowledge state that this method of validity, conditional knowledge, and truths about the subject and object in originated premises are different premises. The schools that do not accept this method state that postulation, extrapolation, and circumstantial implication is either derivable from the other pramanas, a flawed means to correct knowledge initiated, one must rely on direct perception or proper inference. Anupalabdhi. Accepted only by Kumaralabhattu sub-school of Mimamsa means non-perception, negative or cognitive. Professor Anupalabdhi Vishedi Pramana suggests that knowing a negative such as there is no jug in this room is a form of valid knowledge. If something can be observed for inference to or improved, non-existent and impossible, then one knows more than what one did without such means. In the two schools of Hinduism that consider Anupalabdhi is especially valuable, a valid conclusion is either Sadrupa or Asadrupa. Sadrupa means what you say positive, Asadrupa negative. Relation both correct and valuable. Like other Pramana, Indian scholars refined Anupalabdhi to four types. What are they? They are non-perception of the cause, non-perception of the effect, non-perception of arms, and finally non-perception of contradiction. Okay. Abhava. It means non-existent. Same scholars consider Anupalabdhi to be a abhava, while others consider Anupalabdhi and Upava as different. Abhava Pramana has been discussed in ancient Hindu texts in the context of Padartha. A Padartha is identified which simultaneously existent, knowable, nameable. Specific example of Padartha include Dravya, mean substance, Guna, Karma, Samanya, Samavaya, Vishesha, state all. These are explained as reference of negative expression in contrast to reference of positive expression. In Padartha and absence, state the ancient scholars is also existent, knowable and nameable. Giving the example of negative numbers, the silence as the form of testimony, it accepted the principal themes of the Mimamsa Saastra. Shabda. It means relying on a word. Testimony of past or present reliable experts. Hirayanna explains Shabda Pramana as a concept which means reliable expert testimony. The schools of Hinduism which consider it epistemically valid suggest that a human being needs to know numerous facts, and with the limited time and energy available, he can learn only a fraction of those facts in day-to-day life. He must rely on others, his parents, family, friends, teachers, ancestors, and kindred members of society to rapidly acquire and share knowledge and thereby enrich each other's lives. This means of gaining proper knowledge is spoken or written, but through Shabda. This should be known well. The reliability of this ROE is important, and later knowledge can only come from Shabda of reliable sources, has been on how to establish in some schools, such as Charvaka, state that this is never possible, and therefore Shabda is not a proper pramana, mean proof or evidence. Atheism. Mimamsa theories decided that the evidence allegedly proving that existence of God was insufficient. They argue that there was no need to postulate a marker for the world. Just as there was no need for an author to impose Vedas had a god to validate the rituals. Mimamsa argues that the gods named in the Vedas have no existence from the mantra as speak of their humans. To that regard, the power of the mantras is what is seen as a power of gods. Dharma. Dharma, as understood by Purva Mimamsa, can be loosely translated into English as virtue, duty, morality. The Purva Mimamsa school traces the source of knowledge, Dharma, neither to sense experience nor inference but to verbal cognition according to Vedas. In this respect, it is related to the Nyaya school. The latter, however, concepts only four sources of knowledgeable as it is. The Purva Mimamsa school held Dharma to be in an equivalent of following the prescriptions of the Samhitas of the Brahmana commentaries relating the correct performance of Vedic rituals. Seen in this light, Purva Mimamsa is essentially by ritualists placing great weight on the performance enjoyed the Vedas. Now, relation to Vedanta. Relation to Vedanta. Emphasis of yagnik karmakandas of Purva Mimamsa is erroneously interpreted by some to be opposition to Jnanakanda of Vedanta and Upanishads. Purva Mimamsa does not discuss topics related to Jnanakanda, such as salvation, moksha, but it is never speaks against moksha. Vedanta quotes Jaimini's belief in Brahman as well as in moksha. In Uttar Mimamsa or Vedanta, Badarayana cites Jaimini as saying, the Mukta Purusha is united with the Brahman as if it were like the Brahman because description proves so. In Vedanta, Badarayana cites Jaimini as saying that there is no contradiction in taking Vaishwanara as supreme Brahman. In Jaimini is again quoted by Badarayana as saying in the Mukta Purusha attains Brahman. In Purva Mimamsa, too, Jaimini emphasizes the importance of faith in and attachment to the omnipotent supreme being, whom Jaimini calls the omnipotent Pradhana. Purva Mimamsa. Sarvashaktau pravrittisya tata bhutopadeshat. The term Upadesha here means instructions of the Sastras are taught. We should turn to two sutras become significant in which this omnipotent being termed as Pradhana and keeping away from him is said to be as dosha. Hence, all beings are asked to get related to the omnipotent main being. Karma Mimamsa supports Vedas and the Rigveda says that one truth is variously named by the sages. It is irrelevant whether we call him as Pradhana or Brahman or Vaishwanara or Shiva or God. Relation to Vedanta school. An interesting feature of the Mimamsa school of philosophical is its unique epistemological theory of the intrinsic validity of all cognition as such. It is held that all knowledge is Svata Pramanyavada. Thus, what is to be proven is not truth of a cognition, but its fastity. The Mimamsakas advocate the self-validity of knowledge both in respect of its origin and ascertainment, means jnapti. Not only did Mimamsaka make a very great use of this theory to establish the unchallengeable validity of the Vedas, but later Vedantists also drew freely upon this particular Mimamsa contribution. Mimamsa text. The foundational text for the Mimamsa school is Purva Mimamsa Saastra of Jaimini. A major commentary was composed by Shabara in 5th or 6th century AD. The school reaches its height with Kumarila Bhatta and Prabhakara. The Mimamsa Sutra of Jaimini has summed up the general rules of Nyaya for Vedic interpretation. The text has 12 chapters, of which the first chapter is of philosophical value. The commentaries on the Mimamsa Sutra by Bhartri, Mitra, Bhavadasa, Hari, Upavarsha are no more extant. Shabara is the first commentator of Mimamsa Sutra, whose work is available to us. His Bhashya is the base of all later works of Mimamsa. Kumarila Bhatta, the founder of the first school of Mimamsa, commented on both the sutras and its Shabara Bhashya. His treatise consists of 3 parts: the Shlokavartika, Tantravartika, and Truptika Mandanamistra, was follower of Kumarila. Sucharita Mishra wrote a commentary on the Shlokavartika. Someshwara Bhatta wrote Nyaya Sudha, also known as Ranaka, a commentary on Tantravartika. Parthasarathi Mishra wrote Nyaya Ratnakara, another commentary on Shlokavartika. He also wrote Shastra Deepika, in an independent work on the Mimamsa and Tantra Ratna. Venkata Dikshita Vartika Bharanya is a commentary on Tuptika. Prabhakara, the originator of the second school of Mimamsa, wrote his commentary Brihati on the Shabara Bhashya. Shalika Natha's Ruju Vimala is a commentary on Brihati. His Prakarana Panchika is an independent work of this school, and the Parisishta is a brief explanation of the Shabara Bhashya. Vedanta Deshika's Sheshwara Mimamsa was an attempt to combine the views of Mimamsa and the Vedanta school. That is the Sastra of Mimamsa. Om Shri Kantaya Kalyana Nire Nire Dhram Shri Venkata Nivasaya Srinivasaya Mangalam Mangala Shastra Pari Madacharya Purvame Sarveshu Purve Acharya Sakrutaya Stu Mangalam.